Welcome again, everybody. Sorry it's been so long. Let's get straight into it. This is a 1972 Matchbox Beetle Streaker. So I'm going to start as always by thanking everybody for all the comments and the likes and suggestions. It really is appreciated, so please keep them coming. On to this Beetle then. I've got to be honest, it was never one of my favourites as a kid. I could never fathom why it didn't have a steering wheel inside. The body used to flap around every time I used to drive it in a chase sequence with other cars. This little red holder up was always a bit of a pain, and it never shut properly sometimes, so it just used to drive me insane really. So it has grown on me a little bit as we've got older. Typical Matchbox. It's got generic looking wheels that always seem to bend and kink as they go along, but to be fair, they did get a lot of abuse, so I can't grumble too much at that. The majority of the battle scars then is purely because it's sat for eternity at the bottom of a toy box, never to be used. So here we have it. It's going to make a nice little resto job, and it's going to be quite unique, this one, because of this pivoting body. It's got no rivet to take apart, so cracking on with it. It's quite soft metal, so some pliers on there just to nip them apart and take the assembly out. There will be some drilling later on to take the windscreen assembly and the interior assembly apart, but for now it's a minute or so just to quickly take them off. And here you can see I'm going to have to be a little bit careful whilst drilling this one this time, because I don't want to go all the way through. There isn't much material there just to get it off, so I'll have to gingerly do that. Again, internally on this one I'm going to have to be a little bit more careful, but the detail on the engine isn't too bad, to be fair. I just could never fathom why it didn't have a steering wheel, and it used to drive my dad and my granddad insane. Why hasn't it got a steering wheel? Why hasn't it got a steering wheel? But, you know, my little mind even back then was full of the details. So I'll start then by drilling off this windscreen assembly. As always, I'm not overly bothered with coloured screens. I never particularly like them, and I'm just pivoting this one in the little grip just so I can get a feel for it under my finger, just how much pressure I'm putting on. And it's literally just a little light tickle of the top with the drill bit, and it came away relatively easily. So I'll repeat the process again, being a little bit more careful again with the interior, because I'm undecided whether to locate still onto these pins afterwards, onto the nipples should I say, rather than the pins, or to glue it of some fashion inside once I get to that stage. So coming apart, again one of my favourite bits, finally seeing inside what these cars look like after all these years, is not a bad chromed plastic detailed engine bay, and I'll keep that. I'll just paint over the top of it. I'm not going to go too mad with the primer on that. Again with this, I'm a little bit unsure whether I'm going to glue it at this stage or try and put something on top of them, but for now I'll chuck it in the famous little box of jizz now. Chuck it in, and I won't cover too much on this because I've done it so many times in the past. I tend to leave it just for an hour or so. This is a product from here at home in the UK from B&Q, just their generic own brand, quite cheap. I think it's about £3 for a litre bottle. But once you've given it a good scrub off and a bit of a clean up afterwards, it's left with a nice little body again. Not much work needed on this one. As I said, it's really just paint that came off this one. So again, I'll very quickly primer this one up, ready to lay some coats of paint down afterwards. And whilst it's drying, I'll take a quick look at the chassis, and all I'm going to use is my little rotary drill. Again, give it a bit of a tickle with the wire wheel. Not too much pressure, and just clean it up a bit. And it's turned out not too bad. There's a little bit of marks and pitting in there, but nothing too ugly. But again, going back to now to the body, the reason why I put primer down, as we all put primer down on as well, is not just to get the paint to adhere to it, is you can also see the deformities in, if any, that was there, and there was a little bit of something I hadn't noticed on the body. So once I've flattened that down a couple of times and given it a couple more coats of primer, I can lay down a few coats of the base paint. I am using a rattle can again at this stage, but for those amongst you that keep asking me about the airbrush, I will crack that one open on this one in a short while. But back to this interior now. I think I have decided now at this stage I will use some other method of bonding this together, and I'm going to use a product called EpoPutty, which, for those of you that don't know, it's really for aquariums, for putting the coral down internally in a little fish tank, and it's really, really good stuff. You mix equal parts together and it goes like chewing gum once you start squidging it both together, but it hardens relatively quickly. But if you use wet fingers, you can keep molding it like clay. But here's an example. You can make all sorts of stuff out of it. You can make body kits on other cars. It hardens like putty does, quite hard, like resin, and you can file it, sand it, cut it, drill it, and you can make little things as well, little bucket seats, little replica turbochargers. You can make your own little parts basically. So I'm going to stick that inside between the interior and the chassis once I've decided on the wheels, and that'll hold it. If it can hold rock underwater, it'll definitely hold this together. It's really, really strong stuff, so I highly recommend it. So I'll do that later on. But for now, I'll crack on with the interior and finally put to bed my hatred of this car with the steering column. And there's a little tool that I use. I got it from Micromark, I believe, in the States. It's got a little razor blade on there. You get some little angled sections, 45 degrees, 90 degrees, flat sections, and it's literally a little chopping board for model makers. And as you can see, all I'm going to do with this, just slice a little bit off this tube and make the start of a steering wheel. So with some other little products again from Evergreen's models, this is all styrene again. Really great stuff to work with and use. You can spend hours making all sorts of great little products with this, and a little bit of the liquid bonding product just to stick it all together. Well, it melts it, it welds it together, and what you're finished with is the start of a little steering wheel. And I'll just repeat that process again and bond it, weld it together to finish it off, and then I'll use some proper super glue like I have here to stick it inside. So we'll start making headway with this interior now. And all I'm going to do is just go around it with some Tamiya paints and just start to detail it up. I won't bore you all too much with watching me paint every single part, so I'll just show you a few little parts as I go along. always like a red engine block. Don't quite know why. I've never actually owned a car with a... Oh yes, I did technically. I had a Sierra Cosworth a while, long time ago actually. That had a red block on it. And then what I'm going to do now is just use a bit of dry brushing technique. I'm just going to put some discoloration into the exhausts. And again, all I'm doing is loading up the brush, knocking a bit off it by just wiping it on paper towel. And less is more. So I'm just trying to blend in as best I can. Some gold and some blue, just to show a little bit of heat discoloration on the pipes, make it look a little bit more real. Sometimes you can overdo this and it just looks like a Christmas tree, so it's best just to take your time. Again, you can use thinners and thin bits of the paint away if you go too wild on it. And what I'm going to do is, like what I did on another car on my channel, on the T16, on the Peugeot, is I'm just going to drill some holes into this little moulding and put some replica ignition leads in. And I use different types of wires, but with this one I'm using some bracelet bead making wire, really cheap from the little hobby, the little craft sections and the little hobby stores, probably £1 for different colours. Works really well, bends really easy, cuts really easy. And all I'm going to do is going to cut some more of these little, well, I've already cut these little pieces of styrene so the wires have got somewhere to go to make some little coils. Good thing about drag cars is they're all quite different, so it doesn't really matter what underneath is going to look like. It's not going to be an exact match to anything specifically I've seen. So all I've done then is, once I've put all the wires in, I'll flip it over and I'll simply glue the wires underneath. Use a bit of activator just to speed up the process, and it, within a few seconds, it hardens, so I can get cracking and just finish it off by bending the wires and sticking it into these little coil type things, little dizzy caps. So there's the final finished piece. A little bit different to how it originally looked, and now I can finally imagine it'll steer. So I'm going to mask it off now. If you haven't probably already guessed by now when you've seen the thumbnail of this, I think we all know where we're going with this car. And you can use stuff like micromask to paint on some little mask and cut it away, which I'll show in another tutorial. But for now, I'm just going to stick with the Tamiya tape to do all the masking. So here, finally, I'm going to use an airbrush. Everybody in the past on the other videos is, why don't you use an airbrush? Why haven't you got an airbrush? Well, I have, but I just use it when it needs to be used. And the cars that I've done so far on my channel didn't really warrant me cracking this open and firing it up. So now it does. So all I'm going to do is a few light coats, which I won't bore you too much watching all the different paint processes, but a light coat, just tack it in and start off the base layer coats, which I'm doing now. And I did 2 further coats on this one. I didn't go too mad, so I didn't fill in any of the details. And I'm happy to say, as per usual, the Tamiya tape for me has worked gloriously, like it always does. No bleeding underneath, and it's come out pretty sweet. So there's no prizes for guessing, like I say, where we're going with this. The only reason why I did it on this drag car is I was going to do a proper Sand Scorcher replica, but I couldn't find the paddle front wheels, so I decided to do the bit of a mashup and make it the drag Scorcher, and take some from the Greenlight Tokyo Talk series and from the All Terrain series. And if you've never used these particular wheels before, really easy. You don't even have to glue these. They come with the little bars, the little axles, slip straight into the moulded rear of the wheel, and they go on really, really easy. So what I'm going to quickly do now is just drill a little hole, which I'll show you the reasons why I'm doing this later on, just in the back of the chassis where the body pivoted from the chassis, and I'll explain that a little bit better in a moment. But I'm going to get on and fit the wheels to the car now, and for that I'm going to have to seal in this body, which, as I said, I'm going to use this epoxy, EpoPutty should I say, not epoxy, EpoPutty, and it's mixing 2 equal parts of hardener and resin. And as long as you seal this up afterwards again with some plastic bags or cling film and keep the air away from it, they do last quite some time. But you'll soon, even though this doesn't look a lot, you'll soon, when you're using it, realise that you often mix far too much together, so that's why you end up making silly little things like bucket seats and stuff out of it, so you're not throwing it away. And all I'm doing now is just chopping off a little bit, spreading it out, and it goes like chewing gum. It literally is like putting your hand underneath the school desk and realising the dirty pig in the lesson before has left some chewing gum underneath there, and you just put your hand in it. But it's super strong stuff, a little bit like no nails in the sense it'll grab very quickly once you put a bit of pressure on it, but once it seals rock hard. And as I showed you before, it's really good for making body kits and stuff out of, but as you can see, it's grabbed straight away and it's really good. As always, I'm going to make some of my own windscreens. I don't like the coloured screens, so I'll quickly do a quick overview of this. I've done this quite a few times in past videos, but I'll just, for those that are watching this as the first video, is just give you a quick look into it. And what I'll do is I'll probably, like I've done with my how-to on the decals video, I'll probably do a how-to on this just so other people can refer to it. But all I've done is just drawn a quick profile of the existing one. Use this Evergreens clear sheet again, cut round it, and I've just done a quick lay up inside. I haven't glued it in just yet, but just to see what the look and finish of it is, because before I glue it all in I need to finish a few fine details, and obviously put the decals on as well in a short while. But I do like to put some extras on, like the glass seals, indicators. I've obviously got the little parachute bag on the back, which I'll do as a final piece. But here we go, is the Sand Scorcher decals that I've made. And what I've done on this occasion is, on my other video when I showed you on how to make the decals, that was based on transparent material, and a few people have asked what do you do when it's being mounted on a coloured or a dark paint. And the only other real suggestion I can put out there is making a little mask doing the same again, which is okay for a shape. It's a little bit difficult at this scale if you're doing text, but I'm simply just going to do a mask of white on white decal paper underneath it, and then lay the coloured decal that I've made over the top of it. And I'm just doing it quite quickly on camera just to show you what I mean. I will go a little bit more slower and precise afterwards, but just so you get the overall picture of what I'm trying to do, is now I've got the printed transparent decal, I can now print over the top of it and effectively give you white writing underneath, which I hope makes sense. Et voila, like that. So I'm just going to seal it all in again with some lacquer. Again, I'm just using standard clear lacquer from Car Body Place. It's come out after 3 coats. I did a light little dusting to start with and 2 heavier coats afterwards. Comes out nice and blingy. So some final paint I want to put on afterwards now. So I didn't want the parachute bag at the back to be nice and shiny. It needed to be matte, so that's why I'm painting these little extras afterwards. But what I'm going to do now is fit the top to the chassis, and now, as all good drag cars have little wheelie bars, I've decided to use my trusty little paper clips again, which fitted just perfectly to attach the two together. But I had an idea I could actually use the full paper clip itself and turn it into the wheelie bar. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to just thread the two together, work out equal amount, for which I'm going to bend it, and then finally I'll solder it all together once I've got it into a decent position. What I'm going to use, even though I've got flux cord solder wire, I'm still going to paint a bit of flux onto these paper clips, because I've always found they're really a bit of a pain to solder together. So you can scratch them up a little bit, rough them up a little bit, but just dabbing a little bit of extra solder on, extra flux on, helps the solder along. Now here's the little hole I was on about at the back, and what I'm doing with this is I'm just giving it that little extra support and that little brace, because obviously that wobbles around quite a bit, going up and down with the body. So by putting this little extra bar in the middle and soldering that in, we'll keep this wheelie bar in situ underneath without that flopping around everywhere when it's finished. And again, just quickly repeat the process. Blob on some flux, start the solder off on the iron, and then Bob's your uncle, we're away again. Some final little bits now, a little extra bar so I can put some wheels on. I could have elongated the other bar, but I just wanted to add a little bit of extra details in and not make it look just a square flat blob. And all I'm going to use is some styrene again, just to make some little wheels on the end, just to finish it off. And once they're on, glued in place, painted, I can snip off the extra bar and all is good. And that is basically everything I've put into this scorcher, so drag scorcher. So if you have a quick look at how it once was again, something I loathed as a child, and hopefully now it'll see a little bit more love. Here is the final product. I give you the drag scorcher. I certainly think it looks a little bit better than the original one was. Something a little bit different. As always, I like to mash things up a little bit. Those eagle-eyed people may have noticed the black sticker on the back is a Fat Willie Surf Shack sticker from the 90s. Everybody who was anybody had a little Fat Willie sticker on the back of the car in England. And as always, just showing you that the cars do roll. You can use them. But once again, thank you all so much for following me and watching my little world of these diecast cars. Until next time.